Hey, it's time for another edition of Ask
Mom
and Dad. I'm just not sure how it goes anymore. It's been so long since we've done an episode of this show.
Yeah, we let at least my mother down when we don't go ahead and go back and do this.
I'm so sorry.
Well, no, she actually looks forward to listening. I don't know about anybody else. Nobody seems to request it except her. So that's okay.
Sorry. That's not true.
Sorry
I think
for
other
her.
people care. Don't you think?
Well, I didn't
other
say they
people
don't care. I said they don't request it. Maybe they don't. Whatever.
Maybe it's just not. It's not.
It's not the forefront of their minds when they talk to us.
It's not the top of mind.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's been a little while. It's been November since we've done this, and since it's the first of the year, we figured we'd start our New Year's resolution off by getting back to our podcast for all you happy listeners who are dying. And it only took us, and we started on those on 13. So if you believe in luck, 13 is irrelevant. 13th. Today's the 13th. It's Saturday the 13th, so it's the day after
Weird.
horror movies.
The day after. Okay.
Well, we're coming out of Christmas, which for some people could have been a horror movie. I'm sure, depending on how things went.
Not.
There's a lot of slashing
there was
going
some
on.
People, no.
Yes, there is.
Was some
The
who
victims
lost
are usually
people.
boxes and paper.
Oh,
but it's a lot of
That's a
slashing.
good point.
I mean,
and there was some people who lost loved ones, so we be
That's
tender
true.
about that.
We had a couple of folks that did, and that's unfortunate. But that's the it's life.
Part of life.
It's part of it, and so now that we've come to that note, I'm sad.
Well, but back to the slashing boxes. Yes,
let's
those
get back
poor
to-
boxes.
Hold on, wait a minute.
They're in pain.
Rewind back to reset the record. Now, anyway, there was some news. So since we haven't been on the record I'm not Greta Van
Are we on the
Susteren.
record?
Yeah. It's not on. That's Fox's title. It's the record for
Right.
news. Because who knows? Anyway, jeez. Remember that part where you said, "What are we going to talk about?" This is the part where I'm confused. There was something that I thought was funny and interesting over the holidays, and so this happened in the story broke in November. But I want to share this. So just check out this 1 minute clip off of news.
Should parents be penalized for eating out with loud, unruly kids?
The owner of a Georgia restaurant thinks so. The steakhouse is going viral for its $50 adult surcharge. The fee will be tacked on to the tab for families with children who are extra noisy and rowdy. Apparently, the punishment for parents who can't parent is listed on the menu. But one mother said she thought it was a joke. The owner said he never had to enforce the fine until 4 families showed up with 11 kids under the age of 8 who were allowed to run all over the restaurant.
Yeah, it's always tough.
Don't you hate
It's
that?
tough when that happens. But I don't know. How do you charge a fee? I mean, how do you decide? Okay.
Yeah, right.
Okay, that's enough of
That's
that. I just
interesting.
thought
Wow.
I'd interrupt it there because that's just good stuff right there. And so it's kind of funny because on the first hand, it's one of those things where whoever the restaurant is doing what a lot of people would like to see happen.
Maybe so.
But I read an
possible.
article on it. Let's see if I can find it. It was the person who it happened to apparently was interviewed as well, and there was they were stopped outside. And they thought their kids had acted really well considering how many of them there were. And
I
that,
mean,
there's
that
4
makes sense
families
to
with
me.
400 kids. And okay, look, so our kids are a large family, and we've taken our.
We are a large family
well,
when we are with our kids.
When
Is
we're
that-
all together. Now
especially
it's
when
our
they're
kids
young.
and grandkids, right?
Yeah.
but-
Still big.
But the thing is so there's a couple things in mind here. This is being so whitewashing the facts. A restaurant.
Right.
It's a steakhouse. Now, there's a big difference in taking your kids to Sizzler, also a steakhouse, and a fancy, small steakhouse. Steakhouse is,
Okay.
I go to a
Or
steakhouse or
what about
a
a
Texas
buffet?
Roadhouse.
Because then there's a buffet that serves some, semblance of steak.
Semblance
That's a
of
completely
steak.
different story. Well, that's funny to me because we would never have taken our kids to a steakhouse, but that's mostly because we couldn't afford it, for number one.
Fair.
Number two, most of our kids, there might be a couple of your older boys who would have eaten a steak, but a lot of them, and they may have eaten it, I don't know. To me, it's a little bit hard to eat for young ones. So then I'm thinking, we went to a couple of buffets, which were big enough shenanigans, but at least our kids could serve themselves. Usually they could get whatever they wanted rather than a specific thing they were served. That's what I was thinking in the first place. Who would take their kids to a big fancy sit-down restaurant? Oh my goodness.
Well, that's what I'm saying,
Especially if you
right?
have very many little ones who can't really eat that anyway. They might eat a bite or two of mac and cheese or somebody's bread.
Yeah, it sounds like the way for this family that was interrupted everyone's dining experience. They were brought out. Approached by the owner outside after the restaurant, and he showed him the fee. And I'm thinking that means they've already paid.
Oh, so they may not have even realized it.
Yeah, which means that's what I'm saying.
This isn't a scissor.
This isn't a sizzler where it's noisy.
Like a lowbrow?
The point of the matter is if you've got a bunch of children, behaved is a relative to the environment, right?
Yeah, I know your story. You're gonna go. Yeah, it definitely is, because that's what I'm saying. Why would you take a bunch of kids to a big kind of fancier, quiet restaurant? Because first of all, they may not eat that food. Second of all, and it will cost, more. But then second of all, how do you entertain them for that long? When you've got little ones, there's literally an entertainment factor going on here, because they've got to have stuff to play with or napkins.
They've got to be, especially so you got these 4 families, so the adults, and from what the woman said in the article that I read, is that their children are all down on one end of the table and they were all up there. So the parents are enjoying each other while their kids are out of sight, out of mind. Right. And I'm thinking to myself, she says, I thought the kids were fairly well behaved. I even commented how good our kids behaved.
Meaning they were up and running around the restaurant, because the other ones were. Was this one up and running around the restaurant? This is what the
guy said. The kids were up and running around the restaurant. So I'm like, which is the fudgesicles? Maybe. And he said in Discord, he said he never had to charge anyone until this happened.
That's so funny.
And so, I mean, because so what that tells me is he put it in there in order to make parents be mindful not for him to do it, but to be mindful of their children.
So he could pull it out with a threat if he wanted to,
yeah.
But also to make them aware. And that actually isn't such a dumb idea. Here, let me let you know this right up front, so you'll be aware that this is a quieter environment, whatever. One person we heard in that interview right before said, why would you even allow kids in the restaurant if you've got this particular setup that you kind of want to preserve? And
because if a family of 4 comes in and 2 of them are children, the children aren't going to be problematic.
Well, I know, but I'm saying to some degree, if you've got this standard you want, maybe you're trying to set it up as a romantic spot, or you want this to be a kind of highbrow, office execs or something, then you would say, maybe even you could say 15 and under or something. No promises that any older than 15 aren't going to cause a ruckus. Sometimes adults are as bad as children. But yeah, okay. So I wanted to go back. When you said that, I thought of when you talked about the bigger table and the kids around the end of it and the adults over here. It's kind of the way people parent these days, though, too.
Well, no,
over
we've
there.
Done it. I mean, let's just think about it. When we've gone out with our daughter and her friends to like Mexican or whatever, the kids are all down at the far end. But the point of that's a noisy restaurant to begin with. We've never gone into a quiet restaurant.
Sure. Well, what I'm trying to say is, though, most people actually do kind of parent that way. The kids over here learning or being entertained or being babysit, and the adults over here having their interactions. I would say that's not how we do most of life. Most of life is with our kids in the middle or around our feet or whatever. However, there are some settings where you hope to have some adult interaction and you're going to be able to set the kids over here. But I agree with you. Usually that's not going to be true if it's a kind of a fancier ordeal where you've got a certain amount, because kids have to still have some supervision. Now, for us, there might have been an older child scattered in, and then we would, kind of put the authority on them, or the weight of the responsibility of keeping chaos down or whatever. You could tell the story about us walking. I think we've even told that on the podcast once before, but
when we left the restaurant, someone said how nice our kids had been.
Yeah.
And I was like, we're both walking out a little bit full of pride, but then my thought was, They didn't tell us how good our kids have been. They were so shocked that when they saw a party of 9 walk in where only 2 were adults, that they were like, their first thought was, our dinner is ruined. Yeah. Why doesn't this place charge a $50 surcharge if our kids are bad? And then our kids were actually well behaved enough. Or at least they came in below the threshold of their expectations. Because you and I never walked out of any place thinking our kids were perfectly behaved.
No, absolutely. That's
especially you. And me, I'm like, what are you talking about? Nothing was broken. So
I think within this situation too, if the owner truly did have a certain expectation and he saw this huge family, or you said may have been 3 or 4 families with a bunch of little ones. I can't remember what it was.
It said 4 families.
Oh, 4 families, and they grouped together. First of all, you want to warn them right up front. Warn them. Be careful, because this is something we are trying to be aware of. Because if you've got a certain number of kids, seeing them come in, you do kind of, like you're saying about that couple that may have talked to us, have an expectation that that's probably not going to be under control wonderfully.
Well, and it's clear this restaurant doesn't have a party room.
Yeah,
You know, so
like
because
this
if they did, if I
separated
had
out
a restaurant
area.
like that and I had a party room, I would be deliberate about seating the family in a place where I could cordon them off for the sake of it.
Yeah.
But the picture of the restaurant that I saw online is this is a rustic cabin-like environment overlooking Lake Tacoma in Georgia, and so that's serene, the whole point of it, and it's not large. So, I mean, I don't know who's got enough money to take their kids to high-end
again,
steak dinner anyway.
I
But
know, right? That's what I was saying. Again, the owner, I think, has the right, if he's put that in too, and actually, no matter whether he's put it in there or not, to go and kind of have a, right before you set these people down, or as you're setting them down, to let them know, here's some of the rules, or can you guys be aware of this? And I don't think there's anything wrong with communication is good. Upfront communication, best. Here's what I expect. You know, try to set within these boundaries. The problem in this situation is you really don't know what that means. Like we're
Right.
just saying, what is and like that lady was saying at the end there, what's the draw? Where's the line drawn? How
who's the
good
judge?
is good or bad
Who's
is
the judge?
bad? Yeah.
Well, I think to me, one of the judgments would be, and this is the thing, the 2 articles I looked at and now 2 little clips. Nobody's considering the fact is, what is that criteria? Is it just the manager's irritated or the owner's irritated? I don't think
Right,
so.
who is the
I think if I'm the
one?
owner, there would likely be someone who complained. I would say if someone complained that the restaurant was noisy or that something was, and said something to
Yeah.
me about it, is there anything you can do about that? That's a line drawn. Because I mean, besides the fact that you as a parent, if you're going into a place that's usually a quieter restaurant, that's what I'm saying. Well, anyway, first off, I would say if someone complained, that would be
and then you deal with that person. If you can tell that person's kind of grouchy and they, I don't know, whatever, maybe they're a regular customer or something, you could pamper them a little too. You could offer them a free meal next time or something like that, as opposed to get on to the people because you're not quite sure. But you're right. What was the next thought you had?
I was going to ask the follow-up question to that is, so if we want to move off of this subject and move into the next
Well, I
question
had
is,
something that would go along with it.
that's fine. I was just going to, the follow-up question for me is, so if you're a parent and you have a bunch of kids, or you want to go out with your friend, because the kids are picking up in families. I'm seeing more and more larger families today, at least with 3 or more.
Right.
So say you've got a couple of your families, a couple families of 3 with 3 kids, that's 6 kids in a restaurant against 4 adults. So what if you want to go out? How do you choose a restaurant that would allow you to be an adult and have a conversation with an adult while also managing your children? How do you do that?
Yeah, good question. First of all, to me, you got to cater a little bit to the kids. You got to at least have something that's going to, like some of these restaurants that have, say, the crayon and coloring packets and stuff. That's pretty good. Like I was
They're
thinking of
clearly
Applebee's.
expecting children.
Yeah,
Yep.
Applebee's is a decently. It's not cheap, and it's not maybe 5-star sit down steak, whatever. But it's a decent place. But they usually offer something like that. Well, I was thinking, and yet you might go in there with the 2, man and woman just sitting down together, or a party of 3 or 4,
Right.
whatever, or you might see a family. So those kind of situations are pretty good. And then I was thinking of like pizza places. Well, usually those aren't expected to be really quiet. Pizza Hut back in the day used to be a little bit more
So
Italian restaurant-y, where you would have maybe a bigger party, like you said, back in the back an area quartered off, kind of where people make a little bit more noise, but then the rest of the place might be a little bit low lighting and
Right.
decently quietish. But I think first of all you have to think about
you have
that
to
you've got
consider your
kids
children's
with you.
age
You've
and what's
got-
age appropriate for
Exactly.
them. What you referenced just then was good, though, is also consider the volume in the restaurant. You know,
Yeah.
if it's a louder place, then you can take some kids that are going to be a little loud.
Right,
It's kind of like
exactly.
saying, you know, hey, it's
Well,
you
like
don't want to be in a restaurant like when you're in church and your kid decides to say something like, I got to go to the bathroom when everyone's praying.
Right,
You know,
exactly.
you want to be
like,
mindful of that.
Buffets tend to be loud and people are getting up and going quite often.
Right.
So that to me is a little better. And usually the quality of food is okay. And you've got a gamut, a variety of different types of food, including even some will serve ice cream
Buffets
or
tend to
something
cater
like
to
that.
families as well.
So yeah, might be a little pricier, but usually it's worth it because everybody can get something they like or whatever.
Yeah. I
The
want
other
to, just to make
thought
a
might
point
be-
about considering your environment, I just want to tell this story that has no kids involved, but it was funny. Like I met someone for lunch in a pretty well-known restaurant in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. And I met this person and went there, and this person had recently had some issues with their larynx, and so they couldn't talk very loud, and also said they couldn't hear very well. Now, that's not a problem for me. I can hear. I can be loud enough for
can
someone
press
to hear.
in or- yeah,
but
you can-
but when I went in the place, it was packed for lunch, and it was over the top, and it was the loudest. It was all hard floors, hard walls. It was an old brick building, all the ambiance and everything you'd want for good food. And so when he told me all this, I said, "So why did you pick here?" And it was because the food is good, and I liked it last time I was here. But the whole time he's talking to me, and he's soft spoken, so I'm having to lean across the table and say, "I'm sorry," and I never really could make eye contact while I'm listening because I'm having to look down so I can make sure my ear is aimed in his direction. I felt deaf when I left the place. I'm going, why am I?
Interesting.
But
Well,
in
there's
we were there for a couple of hours because it was a first conversation, and
Well, and
but by
that's-
the time we got halfway through it, place cleared out, and all of a sudden it's like, now
It's a
this
good
is what
thought,
you need to
though.
invite me for.
Because the reason a lot of times older people are in that might complain about that would probably be for that exact reason. If they cannot hear very well and the white noise issue has become a problem for you, and I know my mom struggles with that, then they can't hear the party they're with if next door to them or nearby is a louder party. It doesn't even have to be kids, but a lot of times kids just have louder, shriller voices that carry worse. So that is something to consider, that who you sit by. You know, if you notice you're going to be sitting by a couple of older couples who probably look like, I mean, they're alone and they're, you know, likely out on whatever they're trying to enjoy their meal. You might want to ask whoever's seating you, the hostess, if you could sit further away just so you don't become a problem for them.
Yeah,
Not because
sure.
anybody's going to complain or
And
want
I'm sure
to
that
complain.
in
but
the service industry, most people are kind of trained when seating families and whatnot to
they,
kind of be
yeah,
mindful of those
surely
things.
they are. Not always, though, because some of these ones who that's their first job or something, that might be something they're not aware of. So they
So pick a thing that's age
think it's
appropriate.
worth yeah.
That's one thing. Make sure you look at your family and go. But if you've got a large family, age appropriate is going to be a little bit different. But if you have older children, I would add to this: have your older children be responsible to maintain what you expect of the younger children in those environments.
Exactly.
So you can turn your attention. You know,
Yeah,
it's
that's right.
basically a reward for the child. You can say, listen, older child, you can either get paid to babysit and stay here at the house, or if you want to go out with us, you can, but you're going to be babysitting there as well.
Well, and especially if they're not quite old enough to stay by themselves, but they are old enough to begin to take on some responsibility of leadership. If nothing else, then presenting to them, how we expect you to behave, and we expect you to help the little ones behave that way too. So it's good. It's also good parenting, if you can at all, to disperse the adults throughout the kids so that there is supervision. I think something that is difficult. But we've experienced in this little church we've been in how you can get children in order in and around adults who can and will participate and listen without there being a lot of, it's not caused a lot of chaos. I'm so impressed by this little church. I feel like they're very respectful of that. They have probably some littlest ones that they can take out of the room if they need to. But children can be taught to sit right by adults and be respectful. They just aren't
Absolutely,
these
they can.
days.
Yep.
A lot of times. I was thinking of
That's
something
another-
that
so-
kind of
go
went
ahead.
along with this.
Sure.
Did you want to?
I was going to say, yeah, absolutely. And it really is just saying the simplest thing is parents, they're your children at home and in public. Take responsibility for them wherever you are. Don't be out of sight, out of mind
Right.
in places. And that's ultimately what someone felt like probably in this environment. Now, for the real
Likely.
question, to wrap that up and move on to what you've got, should he do that? What everyone's asking, that the whole point of the buzz about it is,
should he
or should he not? Should that be
charge
on the
that?
charge or not?
I don't know. His call, I guess. He's got it out there up front, so it is his call. if it was tacked on because of a complaint and no one knew it was a possibility, that would be wrong, and he wouldn't get customers back if he did that.
You've been warned.
But if it's if
If
it's
you
out
go
there,
into somebody else's place, and the thing of the matter is, a public
Then they
restaurant
have
is
a
still owned
choice.
by the owner of the restaurant, and they
Exactly.
have the right. They have certain rights themselves as to how they want to conduct their business.
and it's their choice to even go on in if they're aware of that,
Yeah.
or to get
Maybe-
up from the table and leave if they haven't seen it to that point either.
And to your point, maybe instead of now this particular restaurant can put a sign on the front door that as you're coming in said, "We were the restaurant that charged $50 for kids that did this. It's on the menu now. It's on the door. Don't make me do it again. It was enough press the first time. But thanks for coming by."
I think on top of that, you say, "I do love children, however."
I had some of my own. They're buried out back.
Oh gosh, no, that's bad. No, I thought of the complaint thing. This was an interesting article I read this morning that I just still can't really figure out what happened, and it sounds like from the article they're not real clear. And both parties settled the problem eventually, but the article said that there was this Chick-fil-A, and it sounds like it must be in the South, not too far from us, probably somewhere. I don't think it was. I'm not sure that it was Tennessee, maybe been Georgia, and across a 2-lane, so 4 lanes of traffic. So like a 2-lane, one direction, that kind of thing, is an apartment complex. And this lady was at 4 a.m. and right before that, it sounds like, being woken up by loud music coming from this Chick-fil-A.
From the Chick-fil-A?
Yeah. So first of all, I'm like,
Cover them
that
killing,
seems
the sound of them
weird.
slaughtering chickens? I don't know.
No, first it was just music, but it sounded like, so we know most Chick-fil-A's have like more of a gentle, like worship music playing in the background. So it astonished me, first of all, that the music was offensive just because it was so loud. So who knows what the music was actually producing, but it was so loud. And she was saying she was astonished by it too, because across 4 lanes of traffic at this apartment complex, she was being woken up by this loud music. Okay, couple things could be going on here. First, she had talked and she had actually called at one point, asked if there was any way they could turn it down. It sounds like it was amicable. She just kind of kept telling them, "I really am being woken up by this."
What time was this?
So it was like 4 in the morning, 3 or 4 in
So
the
they're
morning.
prepping for breakfast? Or
Yeah.
something? Okay.
And what it sounds like at first they said, because she eventually went over and tried to talk to the manager, and they backed it up, tried to figure it out. 2 or 3 things were told. First, they were told it was playing on the front porch area because they didn't want people hovering there. I guess when they actually, from the sound of it, weren't open, like this one manager thought it would deter maybe homeless or people that would hang out there before, So I don't know. And then later they retracted that, saying that wasn't true. I was thinking, no, that makes complete sense to me. If I was there alone, or if I had only a couple people working, cleaning up, no one... like no officers present, places we've lived, that would make perfect sense. You blare loud music, then they know people are in the building. There's no whatever. So I don't know. That was confusing to me. But that kind of made sense to me. But they retracted that. Then they said they were having trouble with their speakers. The manager she talked to said, "I'm sorry about that. We're having trouble with our speakers, something, something, something." It happened again. So it lulled for a little while. It was fine for a little while. Then it happened again. She went back. First, she couldn't find the manager. They couldn't find. Then she finally did get to talk to the manager again. And the manager, it sounds like it wasn't them, but they were aware of it. So it just is confusing as to what ended up actually happening.
So you don't know how the story ends?
Well, the story ended.
Why would you tell me a story with no ending?
I know. Well, the story ended with the music got turned down. It hasn't been a problem since. So I guess since this lady's been interviewed,
but why is it even
was
a story?
finally off. Well, I know.
Slow news day.
I thought that's exactly what I thought. Why in the world? And the complaint was what made me laugh. She's got a picture. It's probably, I'll tell you why it's newsworthy. It's TikTok or
it's a TikTok
Instagram
thing. That makes a lot
story.
Of sense.
It's just, something
It's
they
just
were reporting about what happened. And of course, it's
stories.
Chick-fil-A. They have to make the news no matter what, because anything they can do to offend is going to make the news. I just thought it was so interesting because there's no way to figure out exactly what happened here. parts of it sound perfectly reasonable to me. Other parts I'm thinking, man, her apartment must just be right in the line with the way that sound bounced. Remember how we used to, there was a park we went into where you could stand on one complete end of the park and you're in this circle, concrete circle or something. On the other end of the park, like literally several thousand feet away, is another circular similar thing, and you could whisper in one end and hear it at the other. It was just a real strange, and it wasn't a complete tube or anything. But
You mean like an amusement park that was set up that way?
yeah, it was.
You know what I'm saying?
It wasn't
like a regular
amusement.
family
It was it was like displays, art displays, and stuff like that. So this was one of those, and it was a kind of an experiment in sound. So I would just wonder. That made me think: is it possible this sound was getting caught in a sort of spot that caused it to be amplified
it could be just
a lot
the way,
more
it
than
could be the way it was
normal.
coming off of a building.
Right,
I know, for
right,
example,
bouncing off.
a restaurant we're at, can't think of where it is. Well, no, someplace we're at, but every time a semi would go by, it creates a
Yeah,
wall.
it reflected.
And all of a sudden, that you could hear the volume of whatever was on the patio go up every time a
Actually,
semi
I think
goes
it
by.
was down when we were in
In town here?
in town here. So I think you're right. I think, but that's what. So if that could have pertained, it makes sense. Also, it was literally in the South. She could have been a whoever riled up, take a gun over there and shoot somebody style, but she wasn't.
No,
She
it
was
wasn't Los
trying to talk
Angeles.
to people. Exactly. She was trying to make it. But one couldn't believe the other either. She's not understanding why she's being woken up at 4 a.m. with loud blaring music from the Chick-fil-A across the big road. And they can't understand why she's being woken up by, if they're just getting a volume setting that's a little too high. None of it really makes any sense. But isn't it interesting how people complain about something, and in this setting, I guess it was just, is there anything we can do? Yeah, they must have eventually figured out.
You mean they worked out their
It's
stuff
very likely
together?
they did just angle a speaker a different way. In fact, I'm feeling like that's at the end of the article. I can't find it at the moment. I think at the end of the article they said that they decided to turn off the speakers on one side of their building
woman-
completely so that it wouldn't affect her either way.
So the woman
I think
did
that's
not
how they ended
organize a
up.
protest against Chick-fil-A.
Right.
Because that's what most people do when Chick-fil-A offends them. They
Exactly.
they organize
Exactly.
a protest
They should
against
have,
them. but,
anti
they're
Chick-fil-A
soundish,
music. 'Cause it was sound.
noisist.
It's just interesting because so many different people experience different things. There's worthwhile times to complain. There's other worthwhile or times when it's not worthwhile to complain. And I don't know. I don't know what makes
Those
a
are the
difference.
worthwhile times when it's not worthwhile
Yeah,
to complain.
exactly.
So there's a
I
lot
don't know
of
what makes a
worthwhiles in
difference.
that.
Oh,
Yeah.
I backed off. I retracted.
You attracted your while of worthness? Yeah, that makes no sense. What I just said makes no sense, but that's okay. Well, is that about it for today? Because we've got
I think so.
we got enough to acknowledge the
did
fact that we have not died. The Christmas holiday was, I guess, by that standard,
We're
a
back.
success for us. I hope you had a good Christmas, and if life was less fortunate to you and you had some loss this Christmas, just know that the beauty of what Christmas is that life came through Christmas. Jesus
right.
is the answer to all things and is the one who gives us life eternal. And so with that, I'm super excited. I was supposed to have pushed a button, so I have to keep talking. There it is, the bye-bye button, which I didn't fade in properly. It's been a long time since I've operated
Right?
this
You gotta
machine.
get back
I need
to-
to get the habits into these things.
Practice.
Yes. So the engineer today, I want to thank R. Ite Hand, who is my engineer today, and for the time that he's spent fumbling around without looking directly at the board.
He's
Thank you
gotta
so
take
much.
some lessons,
He
though.
does need some work. He's a little old. I mean, but hey, thanks so much, R. We're glad you helped out. Have a nice day. We'll hear you. We'll check in with you next time on Ask
Mom
and Me, Dad. Take care, guys. Bye now.